Look at the world of authors and artists, that just as there are political changes as a result of an American French Revolution, and people start to look for their newfound rights, as there are also technological changes and economic changes as to how people live their daily lives and how much money they earn and what new products are changing the way they go about their daily life. Artists and authors are also writing new types of literature challenge people in how they see the world, and artists are constructing paintings and sculptures in newfound ways because they have to adapt with the times that technology like the camera is causing them to alter their form of work. There's a lot of classic books and tales that are going to be written during this era with many famous openings. There's the German brothers, the Grimms, who are going to write various historical traditional tales from Germany like Rapunzel. There's the English Beatrix Potter, who writes Peter Rabbit, Les Miserables, the poem The Raven by an American Edgar Allan Poe. Another from the Grimm's fairy tales is Little Red Riding Hood. There's going to be Peter Pan, War and Peace, Herman Melville's Moby Dick on the High Seas, Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Adventure Stories, Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh, Dickens's A Christmas Carol, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and all these new forms, and some of them we'll look at a little more detail here in a second, as the world of artists and paintings and authors and musicians change the way we look at things. It is no longer the Renaissance. It is no longer a Baroque or Art Deco or neoclassical era. That we're going to have three major brands of artists in this era, of beginning first with the Romantics. Romanticism, part of it is about love and romance, the idea that the man in the end of the story will always get the woman he wants, that everyone lives happily ever after, and we feel good about it. That doesn't always have to be the case. Romanticism's ultimate style and genre is it is a form of art which evokes and stirs you as the viewer's emotions. Whether the writing and the wording of the story is a sense of adventure and you feel excited, whether it makes you feel scared and nervous about turning the page and you don't know what's going to happen to the character, if they're going to die or not. So it doesn't have to just be about love, but it is ultimately any form that stirs up the emotions and feelings. And that can be done through the use in paintings and artwork with colors of light and darkness by Spanish painter Francisco Goya to make you feel either rage and anger toward Napoleon's French army that are committing murders and atrocities, or it makes you feel as the viewer compassion for the victims who are being slaughtered. Frenchman Delacroix in the 1830 French Revolution. None of this would be historically accurate, but that is not the point the artist is trying to get across and convey. They want you to feel patriotism, to rise up and be stirred by Lady Liberty or Mary Ann to the cause of freedom against a brutal government. Then there is the German Casper Friedrich, who's going to use nature and landscapes to evoke stillness, isolation, but also of power and strength, that in the world of nature with icebergs and the Arctic and everything clashing against one another. His most iconic is Wander Above the Sea and Fog. Most people don't realize it, but they are inspired and replicate his painting all the time on Instagram. This vastness that here am I as a solo individual amongst a wider, bigger world, and I'm just in awe of it. The most famous then of all the Romantic artists and painters is William Turner. Not the Orlando Bloom character in Pirates of the Caribbean, but J.M.W. Turner. He uses his colors and watercolor material to create a whole new genre, and using the colors of light and dark, yellows and reds of optimism and light to spur on a new style where you're not always knowing exactly what's taking place. It leaves mystery and fogginess. His most famous is this one of Rain, Steam, and Speed, showing now and revealing this new industrial era, where in the left corner you have a river with two men on a boat who are fishing, symbolizing the old ways of transportation and speed, and now the train with the only two major lines in this painting of the railroad track in this new genre of faster and bigger and better. And so through his watercolors, using all different types of blends, where you can see some of the brush strokes, you can see the warmthness and you feel a bit of positiveness, but also using waves and darkness to instir eeriness and fear and the unknown. And then there are going to be a few other types of books in the world of novels, of fictional tales. Some are going to be adventures, some are going to be horror films. You're going to have the Frenchman Mr. Dumas and write a newer version of the Three Musketeers or the Count of Monte Cristo. Adventure tales like Robinson Crusoe's Treasure Island or Swiss Family Robinson by Johann Weiss. Frenchman Jules Verne creates adventure stories. Robert Louis Stevenson's also version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Alice in Wonderland's adventures of fictional novels. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes adventures that eventually the character gets killed off, but such demand for the books were brought up by Londoners that he was brought back to life. There was an Englishman living in India, Mr. Rudyard Kipling, going to write about various tales there. His most popular is the Jungle Book. And an English woman living up in the north of Beatrix Potter writes various children's tales about the types of woodland creatures that live up there, from hedgehogs and rabbits to squirrels and also moles. And then the opposite of romantics, where life can always be good and there are always happy endings. The opposite would be realists in the world of realism, showing how things really truly are. They're not going to cover it up and make it seem happy, like the team that you want to win is always going to win at the end of the movie. They're not going to make the tale where the person who's in the hospital is going to miraculously survive. They're going to tell it like it is. Most famous of all these is Charles Dickens, an Englishman who tells in many of his stories about the realities of life in industrial London. Oliver Twist is a tale of a boy who is an orphan living on the streets of London, going through various shelters and ending up with gangs of pickpocketers, trying to find his place in the world. There are those, again, we've mentioned already, like The Christmas Carol, highlighting the realities that some bosses and owners of companies or businesses like a bank are amassing large sums of wealth, yet the reality is that their employees and the community around them are living in squalor and poverty. And then in Russia, there are two very famous Russian novelists from this era, Mr. Leo Tolstoy and his War and Peace during that time of Napoleon, and various relationships taking place amongst the characters. And then there's Mr. Fyodor Dostoevsky, whose book Crime and Punishment and others not just look to the realities of our physical world, but also the psychological and internally, addressing our emotions, our thoughts, and our feelings. That Crime and Punishment is a story of a man who commits a murder in order to acquire money because he lives in poverty. And he thinks, if I commit this act and get the money, I will be better off. But after he does so, he has to deal internally with the morals and ethos of what has he just done. And now is he really better off? Or now is he even worse off because now he is struggling and tormenting himself over the realities that he has done a bad thing. Tomorrow, we'll pick up with another style called the Impressionists. Thanks for listening.